Huh. This book, I have a crazy story for even owning it. I met this like wild heroin addict, and I was I don't know, I was still like kind of a clean cut little religious kid when I met him. From I think I was in my late teens, and I met him outside a bookstore, and he like we just hit it off because we talked about books, and he said, "Hold on, I'm gonna go steal you a bunch of books." We did not ask him to do that, but this is a book that he stole me, and then we went back to his apartment. It's from a place called Bookstar. The whole chain went bankrupt, and I think it's this guy's fault. But this isn't a particularly outlaw collection in form. Like, I didn't think it was all that innovative. It's free verse. I've read it, but there's a lot of really good, like living on the edge stuff. Oh, look, see that dude I met? Wrote in it. We went back to his apartment, which was full of books, probably all stolen, and music. And he played us Delta Slide Blues. He had like moved to the Delta and learned from all the masters like R.L. Burnside. This guy was incredible. Somewhere in here it says, be brave, be bold, never do what you're told. Or maybe that was in another book from him. But, oh man, crazy. Yeah, this is a really interesting, it's kind of like attempts to make its own canon of who like the outlaw poets are. This guy Jack Michelin from San Francisco figures real large in it. Wrote a lot of his poems as graffiti. That's cool. I swear I switched universes in the multiverse because I can vividly remember this poem in here that's about giving your ex's keys to junkies or something like that. And I'm like, that's so messed up. And then I reread this whole thing looking for that exact poem, and I could never find it. I guess that was in a different universe where Bernstein is spelled different. Bernstein. This I have because I just heard a really good NPR interview with Joyce Carol Oates, and the way that she talked about the family that's described in this novel made me feel like kind of seen, because it's about a messy extended family with divorces and people that are in and out of the family, etc., like that. And I was like, that sounds human and good. This is cool. I read this. I use a quote from this in an epigram chapter. I kind of think of F. Scott Fitzgerald as Elvis a little bit, as like a squandered, diverted talent. I do think he's great, though. I mean, I remember listening to his short stories, which I've since found out, and reading his short stories as a young reader, and just thinking these are perfect. And I've since found out they were written for magazines and like weren't the works that he really felt strongly about. The Beautiful and the Damned. He really did write his era very well. I like F. Scott Fitzgerald. He's cool. Gatsby's my favorite, but I have read some of his others too, especially the short stories. And back in the day, I read a lot of these novels, but Chekhov is someone who I just buy up everything from him. I know eventually I'm going to do a binge and just read all the Chekhov. And this is a novel from him. That's not something you normally see from Chekhov. The Shooting Party. Oh, this is an absolutely fantastic Italo Calvino novel. So funny. Why did I read this in a hospital once? Oh, one of my kids was in the hospital, and that's when I read it. Well, is that what happened? Memory, huh? Let's sort that one out. But I associate this book with hospitals. I know, I think, Anyway, I think I brought it to one of my kids who was on a brief hospital stay a long time ago to read. I thought they would find it amusing, I think, because it's about a dad who loves nature and he's always trying to get his kids to enjoy it, and it just like harms their lives. Like he makes a soup for everyone out of wild mushrooms, but they're poisonous. Or his son runs away inspired by his dad to go join a goat herd in the mountains, and it just turns him into this like hardened laborer with a flinty eye. Oh man. Marco Valdi, or The Seasons in the City. Calvino is such an interesting writer because all his books are totally different. They're a little more cerebral than they are emotional, but they're fantastic puzzles and fun to play around in. I like Calvino a lot. He's got some brilliant stuff. My favorite is Invisible Cities. I mean, maybe that's the cliched answer, but that book's a masterpiece. That's a masterclass too. This book is not that challenging as far as I can tell, but it has really challenged me. I've started to read it a number of times. It has a lot of similarities with my own book in that it's like a Bildungsroman that spans a whole life, and it is playful with its format as it goes. And so whenever I hear of a work like that, I'm like, I should read that so that I know my precedents and I can be influenced by it and can connect my own work to larger traditions and archetypes that'll enrich my work. And from what I read, it's really enjoyable, and it has really experimental stuff in it. I mean, there's like a part where it's just all black, a black block. It's kind of interesting. Representing death, I think. Tristram Shandy. But there's a copy of that in the paperback shelf, so I'll be reading that. By Lawrence Stern. Sometimes I buy contemporary stuff. I mean, we should, right? We should support new authors. I was working at Bookworks, I think, and this caught my attention reading the synopsis. A terrifying and elegant talent you will not soon forget. A woman known only as A lives in an unnamed American city with her roommates. Roommate B and boyfriend C, who wants her to join him on a reality dating show called That's My Party. But there's a blurb, I think, on this. There it is, from Ben Marcus. Alexander Kleeman is one of the sharpest and smartest young writers. Ambitious, promising, brilliant. Oh, the literature of the future. Yeah, I think that lured me in too, because I really love Ben Marcus's book, The Age of Wire and String. This is kind of a cool, interesting premise. What if the Underground Railroad of American history was a literal underground railroad? By the very interesting Colson Whitehead. I read his book about psychic elevator inspectors. It's pretty interesting. Enjoyed it. And I owned his John Henry book that drew on that myth. What happened? More Chekhov. The Cherry Orchard. It's a famous play, I believe. So Dave Eggers' book about trying to give away $32,000. Something he made real just so he could write about it. Even before Sheila Heti was doing that sort of thing. That's pretty cool. I have not read this, but I heard a really good interview with him. It made me want to read it. And I think this is his follow-up to a heartbreaking work of Staggering Genius. So if it's on a similar wavelength to that, I think I will enjoy it. If this book were a movie, I would put it in a spiritual trilogy with Inception and Synecdoche, New York. Because it's about this like capitalist hotelier who just endlessly pursues his business in an impossible way, just endlessly adding to this infinite hotel and with no end in sight or ultimate reason for it. And it's fantastic and fun. I read this as part of the AV Club's Wrapped Up in Books Club. Martin Dressler, The Tale of an American Dreamer. It really is Synecdoche, New York meets Inception, and it's so cool, and I love this book. And by Stephen Millhauser. This made me want to read all of Stephen Millhauser's other work, and he has some really cool high-concept novels, like a Boswell, Samuel Johnson type story, but about little kids, and one is following the other around writing his biography. Hilarious. Alice Munro. I've only read her work in like The New Yorker, but every story was so good that that's why I own this. I will read this. She's a very good writer. Winner of the Nobel Prize in Literature. This is a literary journal. It has a friend's work published in it. I was buying all the Nick Hornby books for a while. I really liked his column in The Believer stuff I've been reading, and I had all those books, which I've since given away. But then I was reading all his novels, and some of them are just great. And he's got a great modern comic sensibility that I appreciate. I like Nick Hornby with a lot of like real emotion too. Like his book A Long Way Down is very dark and kind of realistic. It's great. Cervantes. I need to get a paperback Don Quixote for that shelf unabridged. He's too big to leave out of that project, I think. Cervantes is so awesome. This is not the copy of Don Quixote that I read, but it's just such a good book. I read that back in 2002, sitting by a trailer in Arizona, out in the middle of nowhere. It's like, this is such good literature. What an experience. I do need to read this. This is by my editor from Bacopa, this literary journal. They published a cool essay of mine that is a memoir of 1/60th of 1 second, the amount of time it takes to take a digital photo, punctuated entirely with dashes. So I'm like, you're cool. You published something kind of weird that I wrote. He had good taste, and was like, he like understood the ambitious stuff I was trying. But anyway, then he sent me his book too that he had written, so I need to read that. Home Ground. It looks cool, actually. Albert Haley. Al Haley has his own syrup and pours it. Home Ground is singular, exceptional fiction. Write Morris. This is not the copy I read of Death Comes for the Archbishop, but after I read it, I'm like, I'm getting every copy. This is such a great book. I do have two like geographical quibbles with that she writes about New Mexico, just things she gets wrong. One, she describes mesas as volcanic, and that's like, or not volcanic, granitic. And that's just not really happening. They're like sedimentary rock. And then, and that sounds peevish, but when you're writing about stuff based in reality, it's, you gotta, I don't know. She was from Nebraska, and so she was writing about a place she wasn't from, but still. And then another part, she has somebody walk from Acoma Pueblo to the Sandia Mountains to go fishing. And I'm like, where are you going fishing in the Sandia Mountains? Tain't no water up there. And, and the Rio Grande is on the way. Why not stop at the river where the fish are? And there's other rivers. Anyway, seasonal ones anyway. But forget that stuff. This book's amazing. This book is like clear light. It's just incredible. This book is so good. I'm like, I just saw other times. I felt a feeling from another time. It captured this lonely life of this priest character in the New Mexico desert of the 1800s so well and so clearly, based on Lamy, who a town in New Mexico is still named after. And like, if you can just kind of set aside whatever judgment you might have about whatever group and just be like, this is the story of somebody in a time, in a place. It's just an incredible glimpse into a world. I loved it so much. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm a Willa Cather mega fan from now on, and I'm going to read all her work. She's so good. This should maybe be on the James Joyce shelf because I really own it because of him. This is the book that taught James Joyce the idea of stream of consciousness writing. It's arguably the first stream of consciousness work. Wheel to the Woods No More, a novel of Paris by Edouard Desjardins. And yeah, it's all inside this character's head. Just recounting things. I spent a little time with this book, and it's pretty cool. I think it'll be a good read, but yeah, I was really nerding out over Joyce and just buying all the relevant things for a while. More James Salter, Light Years. Good Scent from a Strange Mountain. I think I got this one because it's like generally nonfiction, and then I heard there's chapters where he's like, all right, I'm just going to write a fictional chapter now because I don't know what happened here. And I think that's a great idea. I mean, if you do that sort of thing and you're transparent about it, then you're still not lying. It's like you're still, a reliable narrator on a nonfiction level. I think that's so interesting. So, somehow at one point I had like 3 copies of this. I've still never read it. I need to read this. When I bought this, it was my understanding that this was Rick Bass's only novel. That might still be the case. I don't know. I have not yet read this. I've read a lot of his short stories, but I have held on to this through every book purge, including the last one, cutting my collection down from 11,000 to 3,000 to 4,000, somewhere in there. And I will read it. I love Rick Bass. He deserves our attention and admiration and praise. There's a book that my daughter Willow wrote when she was really young. A Fishy Lunch. Have you ever been eaten by a fish? There's a box of my dead sister's hair in case cloning ever happens. Oh, Billy Budd and Other Stories. I want to get this in a small paperback size so that I can read it as part of the bookshelf challenge. I hear Billy Budd and Other Stories is really good. I've read this one a couple times. This was originally a gift from my very cool friend Vicky Merriman, who we saw her memoir in the memoir section. But this is the first Calvino I ever read. It's about people that keep buying a book, but it's misprinted every time, and there's weird chapters of wrong books in there instead, and you get all the misprints delivered through. It's very cerebral and very fun and full of cool ideas that have stayed with me. Like the guy trying to teach himself not to know how to read anymore. It's very interesting. Italy's most brilliant modern writer shows that the novel is capable of endless mutations. Like I said in another video, I read his Why Read the Classics this summer, and he's a good critic too. I really enjoyed that. This is considered the first picaresque novel, the first novel of a rogue, and it inspired Cervantes, and it is mentioned in Don Quixote if you listen to it or read it. I was just recently listening to Don Quixote while doing yard work. That's why I said that. But The Life of Lazarillo de Tormes. I listened to this too on audiobook, and I really enjoyed it. But I don't think I heard it all the way to the end. I will read this. I want to read all the classic works and see the whole big picture, you know. Literature is a beautiful thing. I was watching a YouTube video about the movie Interstellar that I love, and it said that one big point of that movie is that the most beautiful and amazing thing that humanity has achieved is all of our collective knowledge and experience across the ages that we share with each other and find out about each other across generations and time and space. And that's art, that's science. And I was like thinking, that's like a book collection too, you know? Is to a degree, you know, an intergenerational conversation, you know, relaying knowledge, ideas, experiences. I love it. I want to know it all. Here's another book I've always felt guilty about not having read. I walked through the town that this is based on in Florida one time, a long time ago. Part of that long ago charity hike up the East Coast. And anyway, I've only ever heard great things about this book. Sadly, she died really poor, working horrible jobs. It's a really beautiful addition to one of those fancy modern. Right, this is the 75th anniversary. I feel like every well-read friend used to have this in their house. I'd always see this on everyone's bookcases. And then Phil Worsley hadn't read it yet. Flannery O'Connor, The Violent Buried Away. I like Flannery O'Connor. I like everything I've read from her. I love the movie Wise Blood, based on Wise Blood. But I'm haunted by this interview I read with her about James Baldwin, where she basically like tells him to stay in his place and is so racist about him. And I'm like, yeah, you're a lady from the South in a certain time. And it just took her down a notch in my estimation. But she is a powerful writer that draws on that Southern Gothic vibe. And look how beautiful this book is. Pretty much anybody you read, you got to read with your brain on, you know, your eyes open. I left a sticker on there. I don't usually do that. I once interviewed Bob Shikochis, Easy in the Islands. He was a super great guy when I talked to him. It was for an article in the Santa Fe Reporter about literary Santa Fe. He was living there. But it was kind of a strange conversation because he was like literally going to the funeral of a friend who had just died. So I'm like, hi. Yes, I would like to meet a National Book Award winner and make that connection and network. But I couldn't be in that mode at all because he was like very sad and I felt really awful for him. But he was a super cool guy. He won the National Book Award the one year they like changed the name, so he couldn't really capitalize off of the award so much. What did you win? I never heard of that. Brilliant. Perfectly capturing the fetid overripeness of life in the warm sun. Contemporary literary fiction in the 80s is like a whole thing. There's so many authors and books and things that you see through the used bookstores and bargain bins and free boxes of the world. And I'm sure a lot of it is really great. But I love the editions sometimes. The aesthetic is great to me. I'm so happy to own this, and I freaking love this book. Roberto Bolano, 2666. I've heard some people hesitant to call it a masterpiece because it was unfinished, but I think it's a masterpiece. Completely altered my writing for a while. It became so lateral for a while. I wrote in an altered style, I remember, for a little bit. It just seemed so fun and natural after reading this. But this book is very experimental. It's also brutal. There's a whole part where it just is describing murders, like in the way of a police file, and it's very numbing. But there's so many great parts to the book, and it's all very epic, and it's always startling, and it moves in such an unusual way, and the themes are huge, and it's full of interesting ideas, and there are good characters. And look at this beautiful edition, slipcover, and 3 sections. This was such a powerful psychological help that it was broken into 3 parts. Reading a book this big, I was like, I can read 3 books this size, no problem. And to read this book is to just think constantly, I need to reread that. I should reread that. But he died before it was fully completed, and another part has been published separately since then. But this is an incredible book. After I read it for a couple of years, I would say it was my favorite book. It's in translation. I also have The Savage Detectives by him, which is a smaller book, but I know people that just love that. And I will read it. Yeah, Roberto Bolano, in translation, of course. 2666. A name never fully explained in this, but I have some ideas on it. Anyway, so those are a bunch of novels from a shelf. Took 2 videos because I got interrupted by a phone call, and this one was 21 minutes long, and 0 people are going to watch it to the end. I can see the watch times. They're not at a full 20 minutes yet. It's like 5 minutes. So I'm talking to myself and maybe some future digital archivist looking at my time. Hello, how's the future? Now I got to put these back on the shelf. Thanks for watching, people. It's cool to see the numbers climb. Nice to find my fellow book-loving weirdos out there. Y'all are cool. Post your own shelves somehow, and I'll watch. Rock and roll.